Ladies and gentlemen, this is my 200th archetype analysis. Yay! Fireworks all over the place, celebration time. Yeah, I never thought that this day would come so fast that I would like get 200 archetype analysis videos already, and for this one I decided to celebrate the occasion with with a proper archetype to review here, and that archetype is none other than Ally of Justice, which is a 5Ds era archetype. Well, first of all, it was a dual terminal archetype, but then was a 5Ds era archetype used by all of the Diablo robots in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which were all commanded by Placido. And yeah, this archetype is one of the worst archetypes ever made, with some very interesting tech cards which were actually fairly powerful, so yeah. This archetype focuses oddly enough on battling light attribute monsters, which it even struggles in doing that, so yeah, it's not a very good archetype like I said earlier, so let's take a closer look, shall we? We oddly enough start off with two normal monsters in the archetype, first of which was a level 5 machine tuner Ally Mind, and a level 6 with 2300 attack and 1200 defense Ally of Justice Clausulus, obviously being a reference to the Mistbird Clausulus. And you essentially don't run these because they are just terrible. Anyway, next up, our first actual effect monster is Ally of Justice Unlimiter. You contribute this card to select one face-up Ally of Justice monster you control, double its original attack until the end phase. As we'll see soon enough, Ally of Justice are not very good at summoning multiple monsters per turn, let alone keeping enough field presence for this thing to even go off. And considering the fact that they are all machine-type monsters, limit removal just arguably does the same thing but miles better, so just ignore this one. Next up we have Ally Salvo, which is another level 2 and their final level 2, which has the effect when this card is destroyed by battle with a light monster and sent to the graveyard, target 2 cards on the field and destroy them. Essentially, this is a pretty nifty form of removal from back in the day, but still it's limited to light monsters and the activation condition is again very specific. But still, popping 2 cards on the field with this kind of effect is actually pretty damn fun and versatile, but again, like I said, it's limited to light monsters, and yeah, this card is pretty much unplayable without a DNA transplant, which might as well be an Ally of Justice card due to how much they rely on it, and they always run 3 of them in any build. So yeah. Next up we have Ally of Justice Core Destroyer, our first level 3. And if this card is attacks or is attacked by a light monster, destroy that monster at the start of the damage step without damage calculation. Well, it's at least an Ally of Justice staple, but this card actually has a straight upgrade in one of their extra deck monsters when we will get to them. So yeah, but anyway, as far as Ally of Justice cards go, this is far from a bad card, but which is still not saying much considering the fact we're talking about the Allies of Justice here. Next up we have a much more useful Ally of Justice card, that being Cycle Reader. It's a level 3 tuner this time around, and during either player's turn you can discard this card to the graveyard to target up to 2 light monsters in your opponent's graveyard and banish those targets. So basically this is a very neat way to disrupt someone's graveyard setup, and it can actually screw over quite a few light-based decks which love graveyard setups such as Light Sworns and something else which might require light monsters to be in your graveyard, such as also Thunder Dragons, although Thunder Dragons usually benefit from getting their from getting their monsters banished, but you can also banish one of their combo pieces which does not require to be banished, so yeah. And yeah, this is basically a very format dependent card that can be useful here and there, and that's the nicest thing I've said in this review so far. Next up we have Ally of Justice Cyclone Creator, which is another level 3 tuner. And once per turn you can discard 1 card from your hand to return spell or trap cards from the field to the hand equal to the number of face-up tuner monsters on the field. This one is, well, it has the potential to be okay, but in a dedicated deck that does not even care about the Ally of Justice playstyle and just cares about swarming a bunch of tuners, which are some needle fiber decks, or Haquifibrax, sorry, decks, which, like I said, this is an okayish effect, well, below okay, but it is a perfectly generic effect that does not have anything to do with the Ally of Justice archetype, as it does not have any light related effects. Which some might say it's a blessing, but as it is right now, you most likely want to destroy back row instead of bounce it back, but yeah, you get the point. It's a very preference-y type of card. Next up we have another level 3 Ally of Justice Searcher, which is a non-tuner this time, and once per turn you can discard one card to select one face-down defense position monster your opponent controls, and change that target to face-up attack position, and flip effects are not activated at this time. Okay, this pretty much segues into another one of the gimmicks of Allies of Justice from the dual terminal lore, and that is screwing around with the effects of flip effect monsters, because lore-wise, Allies of Justice were supposed to exterminate the worm archetype, which are all light flip effect monsters, so this effect makes a lot of sense, but the problem lies in the fact that worms are actually a much more playable and consistent archetype than this, so they can basically run circles around the Allies of Justice. And as we'll see soon enough, Allies of Justice again are not very good at keeping field presence or having discard fodder for this thing to go off, so no, this one's not worth it at all. Next up we have Ally of Justice Unknown Crusher, and this was actually a bit of an upgrade to Core Destroyer. When this card battles an Light monster, remove that monster from play after damage calculation. The keyword here is after damage calculation, because if it did that before damage calculation, I would have called it a much better card. But still, a monster which can banish a monster instead of sending it to the graveyard is actually a pretty good effect, but again, it's limited to light monsters and it's unplayable it's unplayable without DNA transplant, so yeah. It's also an Ally of Justice staple, even though that does not say much. Next up we have a familiar face returning to the channel. We have Ally of Justice Reverse Break. If this card attacks a face-down defense position monster, destroy that monster immediately with this card's effect without flipping it face-up or applying damage calculation. For all those monsters which focus on attacking defense position monsters, which are all face down, the only sole exception being the Drillroid, which is not even limited to face down monsters. This is a pretty standardish effect, and back in the day it used to provide some okayish removal, but this card actually appeared in my top 10 worst archetype support cards video for a very good reason, and that's because it actually has an effect which I actually did not read out on purpose, and that effect is that if there is a face-up light monster on the field, destroy this card. Okay, so why does this effect exist on top of a monster which is made for the archetype, solely made for the extermination of light monsters? It's like a super heavy samurai monster which will have its effects activated when it's in attack position, or when a Cloudian monster relies on being in defense position in order to get its effects. So you get what I mean here. So yeah. Reverse Break is not worth running at all, even if it didn't have that little caveat of its destruction effect. Yeah, it's not a good way to start off the level 4 lineup. Things get even worse with Ally of Justice Thousand Arms. This card can attack all face-up light monsters on your opponent controls once each, and if this card battles a non-light monster, destroy this before damage calculation. Again, very unplayable without the DNA transplant, but if it is on the field, you get an Asura Priest with, okay, the same amount of attack points, but 0 defense for some reason. even though there is absolutely no reason to have 0 defense here. But combined with limiter removal, it can be a solid-ish beat stick, and be sure to link it away or something if you're done with using it, because if anything other than a light monster attacks it, it just gets blown up for some reason. And yeah, it's as far as level 4 beat sticks go, this one is meh at least and okayish at best. So yeah. Anyway, next up we have an absolute masterpiece of design, Ally of Justice Garrod. If this card battles a light monster, it gains 200 attack during the damage step only. Level 4 with below mediocre stats, gaining an even irrelevant stat boost when it battles again a monster of a specific monster attribute. And it's only during the damage step. Wow. This is one of the worst monsters in the entire damn game, and one of the worst support cards ever made. And even with DNA transplant, which would make this thing a constant 1800 attack beat stick upon attacking, this is still far from the level of versatility this archetype truly needs. But yeah, this is one primary reason why I wanted to make this archetype to my 200th archetype analysis, because 200 seems to be their magical number, and this is not even their only monster which actually has the magical number in their use. So yeah. Anyway, next up we actually segue into a somewhat relevant monster, and that is the Ally of Justice Quarantine. This one has a very simple effect, but it's actually very good. Neither player can special summon light monsters. Well, obviously it's a very format dependent card, but I find it a bit of a problem that it does not work with DNA transplant, since DNA transplant only starts affecting monsters once they already hit the field. But still, shutting down light monsters can be a detriment to a wide variety of decks, and it's basically a death sentence against Lightsworns, and it's a secondary death sentence against Blue Eyes decks, because if their god-awful consistency and poor archetype design doesn't kill them already, this will be the final nail in the coffin. So yeah, this one's good, even though yeah, but it's not even limited to that limited to their archetype. So yeah, this one's really good. And next up we have Ally of Justice Null Flyer, their last level 4. Any light monster that has battled this card has its effects negated starting after damage calculation. I think this guy can actually shut down graveyard effects too, so considering Ally of Justice standards, which are again very low, I'll give this one a pass, since again, negating monster effects is fairly valuable in this day and age. So yeah. Next up we have their first level 5, Ally of Justice Omni Weapon. When this card destroys a light monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, draw 1 card. If this card is a level 4 or lower dark monster, you can reveal that target and special summon it. This is without a doubt an Ally of Justice monster which I would without any hesitation consider to be decent, because when it destroys something, it allows you to plus, and if a monster is an any level 4 or lower dark machine monster, it does not even need to be an Ally of Justice monster, you get to special summon it and continue the onslaught. So yeah, but the problem is, because there has to be a problem, is that this is a level 5 Enema archetype that has barely any tribute fodder left for this thing to go off. So yeah, not worth it. You basically run Monarch Stormforth alongside this, because you just need that kind of removal. Anyway, next up we have Ally of Justice Rudra. If this card battles a light monster, it gains 700 attack during the damage step only. It's Garrod a bit better, but on a level 5 with 1900 base attack, so yeah, not worth tributing and not worth discussing further. Next up we have their only level 6 Ally of Justice Enemy Catcher, and has 1800 attack and defense, which is beyond horrendous for a level 6. And when this card is normal summoned, you can take control of one face down defense position monster your opponent controls until the end of phase of this turn. Well, all I'm just going to say is that Searcher is a better card. I honestly did not expect to praise Ally of Justice Searcher, but I just did, so yeah, this is a wannabe hentai tentacle boss monster if I ever saw one, and not an Ally of Justice card by any means. Next up we have their first level 8, Ally of Justice Cosmic Gateway. If your opponent controls 2 or more monsters, including a light monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. This is, spoiler warning, the only archetypal monster with an inherent special summoning condition, and it's a level 8 with 2400 attack, with an artwork that is reminiscent of a continuous spell. So yeah, the consistency out of this archetype is beyond baffling. So yeah, I guess it's worth running along with Ojama Trio of all things in order to basically get a free level 8 beat stick. And also, if you open up with 2 of them when you play Ojama Trio, you can basically go into an rank 8, and this is one of the only tolerable plays that Allies of Justice have access to. And now we move on to their final main deck monsters, Ally of Justice Thunder Armor. This is another level 8 with 2700 attack and 2200 defense. This card cannot be special summoned, and all it does is allow all other Allies of Justice to inflict piercing damage. I would have called this one very good if it actually didn't have the clause where it couldn't be special summoned, meaning then you can use it as ammo for trade and then revive it with something like Monster Reborn or any other revival card in order to get a decent beat stick which allows all Allies of Justice to inflict piercing damage. But as it is right now, it's really not worth running unless you can actually run a build which can afford to make some room for tribute fodder. So yeah. Next up we have a card which was considered very ahead of its time, and it's actually ran in some of today's builds of the game as well. And that is the level 5 Synchro Ally of Justice Catastor. This is a level 5 with 2200 attack and 1200 defense. I think those are the same stats as Omni Weapon. Oh no, the defense is a bit higher. And requires 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters. And at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a non-dark monster, destroy that monster. This card, like I said, was a very good card for its time, way ahead of its time. Since it can pop literally any non-dark monster it battles, so basically crashing this thing into something and destroying those monsters without taking a single scratch of damage, on top of an easy to summon level 5 Synchro monster, was simply an amazing ability to have. So yeah, as far as extra deck monsters, Allies of Justice are actually off to a very good start. So yeah, Catastor is a very good card and he gets a pass. Next up we have a level 8 monster known as Ally of Justice Lightgazer. Also a generic monster, has 2400 attack and 1600 defense, and this card gains 200 attack for each light monster in your opponent's graveyard. I guess if you're playing against a Lightsworn deck, although good luck summoning this thing against Lightsworns in the first place, I guess you can make this card become a very nasty beat stick, but if you really want a level 8 massive beat stick, then you basically run stuff like Colossal Fighter, Red Dragon Archfiend, or any other generic level 8 synchro monster which can basically make better work than this thing. So yeah. Next up we have a level 9 monster, which is Ally of Justice Field Marshal. It requires 1 tuner and 2 or more non-tuner monsters. This time has 2900 attack and 2600 defense, and this card cannot be special summoned except by synchro summon. When this card attacks a face-down defense position monster, destroys it by battle, and sends it to the graveyard, you draw 1 card. Well, if you really crave about additional draw power, you won't be running this, which is nearly impossible to summon in this archetype. Instead, you'll just be running Upstart Goblin or Dark World Dealings instead. And next up we have their final card and their final monster in general. Yeah, they don't have any spell or trap support whatsoever. And that is Ally of Justice Decisive Armor. This is a level 10 with 3300 attack and defense, requires one or more non-tuner monsters, and once per turn, if your opponent controls a face-up light monster, you can activate one of these effects. Select one set card your opponent controls and destroy it. Send one card from your hand to the graveyard and to destroy all spell or traps your opponent controls, and send all cards in your hand to the graveyard to look at all your opponent's hand, and send all light monsters in their hand to the graveyard, and then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the total attack of the opponent's monsters sent to the graveyard. As it is to be the trend with dual terminal boss monsters, they tend to be pretty busted in all the right ways. The first effect is very relevant, and it's actually one of the effects that the Necros of Decisive Armor has decided to inherit. I don't know why. The second effect, that being discarding one card for a Harpy's Feather Duster effect, is actually very nice. And the third effect is again very format dependent, but considering the fact that active Lightsworn decks were actively harmed with this thing's effect, is simply that amazing, and not to mention it provides some very decent burn damage if it actually manages to pull this effect off. And also is it's another secondary death sentence to the Blue Eyes decks, because if you summon this against a Blue Eyes player and activate this effect, it's basically game over, because their hand will be clogged up with 3000 attack light beat sticks. So yeah, this should be called Allies of Justice Blue Eyes Exterminator, which is something we highly need in today's game, because those Blue Eyes decks are not good. Don't get me wrong; they are basically terrible. But their sheer amount of them are basically stealing away valuable pack space for from some very good cards that can actually graze the game, such as some additional Fortune Lady support. So yeah, we need more Blue Eyes Exterminators, and this one does a very good job. However, should be very careful with the ratios, because this archetype can barely even summon it, but thankfully it has generic summoning conditions. So any deck that focuses against fighting light monsters that can afford one tuner and two or more tuners should have a field day with this thing. And that was their last card. Like I said, now it's time to give out some grades. In terms of consistency, the only semblance of consistency here is Ally of Justice Omni Weapon, and that is a level 5, which they can hardly ever summon, but still it's worth running because it's the only form of consistency. But other than that, it's a complete 1 out of 3. The fun fact here is that Allies of Justice actually have a level 1 anime only monster known as Ally of Justice Tractor, which has the effect that you can tribute it to search out 2 Ally of Justice monsters from your deck to your hand. And of course, the opponent must control a light monster in order to activate that effect. And if that effect actually was in the real game, I would have I might have actually given them a generous 2 out of 3 in terms of consistency, but it's still nothing. So yeah, 1 out of 3 in terms of consistency. Power only exists in form of Thunder Armor and Decisive Armor, which they can barely even summon, and Catastor only destroys by card effect, and it does not have that high attack values in itself, so that's a complete 1 out of 3. In terms of comeback ability, there's absolutely nothing of significance. The only semblance of a comeback ability is summoning Quarantine and hoping it survives the onslaught, or maybe setting a single ally Salvo and making a field disruption or happen. So yeah, Cosmic Gateway is level 8 with a special summoning condition, but its stats are way too pathetic to be praised as a comeback option, so that's irrelevant too. Now in terms of protection, well, Null Flyer negates light monster effects, and that's about as far as it goes, so absolutely no protection as well, so 1 out of 3. And in terms of versatility, it's an archetype that's made to kill light monsters, then it's and it's also unplayable without without the DNA transport, and then even with DNA transport it struggles against light monsters as well. So this is against a complete 1 out of 3 in terms of versatility. And those were Allies of Justice. Well, if those were our true Allies of Justice focused on eliminating any extraterrestrial threats we might have in the near future or in the far future, you never know, we would basically be doomed. Humanity would be doomed with saviors such as these ones. But yeah, if you make more of them like Decisive Armor and Catastor, and maybe Quarantine and Cycle Reader, yeah, I dare say Cycle Reader at this point, then maybe this archetype could be brought to some better relevance. It would also be nice if they actually received a field spell which would effectively replace DNA transplant and unsearchable continuous trap to make all monsters on the field light attribute and give some buffs to Allies of Justice when they are battling said monsters. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of things. Basically, make their effects a lot easier to pull off and make those effects better. The end. And now this is the end of the Ally of Justice review, and next time we'll be going on to my regular schedule of reviews, and we'll be going on to the Dual Monsters era with a very recent archetype from this era, and yeah, I'll tell you more about that later. See you all and have a good day, and thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, walkthroughs and updates. Comment, like and subscribe. Be sure to check out my Patreon if you got the time. Maybe drop a few donations if you feel like it. And yeah, have a good day and peace.